differentiated, close to the source of being, the instrumental equivalent of the Indian Om sound, the primordial sound. And it stops your mind too, which is what our gathering is all about. Not to fall below thinking mind, but to rise above thinking mind, where thinking no longer controls you. And so, I'd just like to mention a few practical matters as we're talking about rising above habitual thinking into presence. I recommend that you don't switch on your TV sets in your rooms during our retreat. You will derive far more benefit from this retreat if you refrain from indulging in habitual activities such as TV watching, which will pull you back into the habitual collective mind. And if you have things like little bottles in your room filled with colorful liquids, for the duration of this retreat, I also recommend, I'm not telling you what to do or not to do, I only recommend. Because if I'm going to tell you what to do, then some of you will say, oh, I'll do that anyway, you know what you're telling me what to do. I recommend that you don't open these little bottles either, or order intoxicating beverages in the restaurant. The hotel may be sorry, but that's how it is. Alcohol, as I've mentioned a few times before, has the tendency of, yes, it pulls you out of habitual thinking. You may feel better for a while, no longer your usual problem-ridden self, but you're falling below thinking. You can verify this in your own experience if you continue drinking after a couple of drinks, and you will notice, then of course after a while you won't even notice it, that you're falling off the chair. You're moving below thinking. Even that's a little bit of a liberation. I need another drink. Not burdened by my mind so much anymore. Feel more alive. I feel like singing and dancing. And let's have another one. That's another. So the entire retreat really is a retreat, we could say, from your mind, habitual thinking mind with its patterns. So when you retreat, you step back from it. You step back from all those patterns and you begin to observe them as you're here. You have come here Of course, not alone. You have traveled here together with your mind. It's your companion. So although you're in completely new surroundings, you will quickly find certain thought patterns arise here also. Stepping back from your mind means you become aware that your mind is producing certain thoughts. You can start, for example, with noticing thoughts of irritation, discontent, or complaining. Because even here in paradise, you will find things to complain about. Well, not you, but the mind. It keeps itself going through that. In almost everybody, unless they've already gone some way into the awakened state, habitual complaining is fairly normal. Not just complaining to other people, but complaining in your mind. And even here, your mind will find things to complain about. And when I say complaining, I don't mean not to call somebody if you find a lizard, big one, is in your room and you need some help. You're not complaining. You're telling somebody that there needs to be some change here and you need some help. The lizard came to our window this morning. Or if it was a lizard or iguana or maybe a baby dinosaur, this size. And one of the animals that came visiting during the day, the patio. And so it came, looked. Wonderful to watch, especially if the mind is still. Amazing miracle. It's been unchanged probably for 2 million years. A miracle. And then half an hour later, another animal came visiting. The black swan. And then a family of ducks came. And then 2 kangaroos came. It's all true. Just beautiful to watch. Nature is all pervasive here. The temperature helps. You actually feel the air, the moisture in the air, the sound of the rain, the sound of the frogs, the animals, the vegetation. And many of you come from different climates, so as I have come from a colder climate, so it's wonderful, especially for us, to experience this. And this is part of our retreat. Part of the teaching of this retreat is for you to become attentive to this all-pervasiveness of the incredible aliveness around you. And so to see it, of course, you need to be present. Your attention needs to be there, not drawn into thinking about your life situation or your problems. Your attention needs to be fully in your sense perceptions. And then you're open to the miracle all around you. And so nature can help to anchor you away from thinking, to write a little anchor into presence. So that's the part of the teaching here is nature. Nature is the teacher, apart from this person sitting on the chair, and another teacher you will encounter during this retreat is situations that people or things that don't go according to expectation. In other words, things that the mind habitually would complain about. This shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be raining that much. You will always find something that's not quite right popping up here and there, even on a retreat like this. We had a retreat 1.5 years in Denmark, and a very different place. This is the first time here we're actually having a retreat in a resort. In Denmark we were in a retreat center, more simple. The climate was not quite as pleasant as here, colder. And I said to people, you might be saying, I wish we could be in a tropical place, in a resort. Then we could really go into spiritual awakening without any distraction by cold weather or other unpleasant conditions. And I said at the time, if you were in a retreat center or a place that were absolutely perfect, not that such a thing exists, but let's imagine that there's a place that is absolutely perfect, where you are pampered throughout with the best and most exquisite of foods, and you get massages every day, and all kinds of wonderful treatments with hot and cold stones and all, perfumes all around you and flowers and water trickling here and there. Would that be a more powerful retreat than a retreat where occasionally things don't go according to expectation? No. The great power is really in where, as it says in the song by Leonard Cohen, a crack appears in the nature of things. In the song the line is, there's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So a crack is when habitually you would complain and then the light can't get through the crack. But let's say you're walking and suddenly there's a downpour of rain here, could happen, and you're totally soaked. That's a little crack. Insignificant, but a little crack, and there it's the opportunity to completely become aligned with the isness of that moment. That's how it is, and enjoy being completely wet. If you can't enjoy it, at least you can accept it. And so a different state of consciousness arises, and that is the state of being aligned with the isness of the present moment. And that's what we are practicing, particularly here, but your whole life should become a practice of becoming aligned internally with the isness of now. And a good place to start, or a good place to practice that is here, where you are challenged, but you're probably challenged less than in your habitual surroundings. So our practice is bringing a yes to the now, so that we and the now are not separate. We don't create a separation. So let's use every moment while you are here, not just while we sit here, but while we go about, move about, center, go to the beach, walk through the forest, contemplate nature, the sounds of nature, the sights of nature, and just be completely present to what is, welcoming life as it arises, always in that space of now, welcoming life no matter what form it takes. And that's wonderful. That's life. So no matter what form it takes, you welcome it. And then you notice, beyond all the forms, the rain, the beautiful sound, beyond all that, there is a deeper presence. And that is your own presence beyond thought. That is the presence of who you are, that is the presence of consciousness. So the practice is twofold. It's not just being aware of the incredible aliveness all around you, but also being aware of that which underlies that incredible aliveness. There's a deeper aliveness without which the sound of the rain could not even appear. If there were no consciousness here, there would be no sound of rain. There would not even be rain. So feeling that, feeling yourself, and there's enormous power out there, and infinitely greater power in here. There's not separate. And let's feel that for a moment as we listen to this sound. Feel your own presence, your consciousness, which is the space in which the sound arises. And that's timeless. The sound comes and goes. I spent several hours today listening to the sound of the rain. So all of your sense perceptions then are becoming more acute. You don't lose yourself in the sense perception either. Sense perception helps you to have attention away from conceptual thinking, yes. But you don't want to lose yourself in the sense perception either. There are always two dimensions present. The sense perception and the consciousness. And the consciousness you can give it different names. I give different names because different pointers work for different people. You can call it the stillness underneath the sound. And as you hear the sound, can you be aware of the stillness underneath the sound, not externally, because the sound can be quite overwhelming. But the stillness underneath the sound is in you. And that stillness underneath the sound is the consciousness that you are in essence, the essence of who you are. It's the stillness underneath the sense perception. And that's an amazing realization when you realize that that dimension in yourself, and you are rooted in the stillness, in which thinking is not necessary, although occasionally thoughts may arise also out of the stillness, and if they do, they will be fresh and original, perhaps new, not the old repetitive thinking. There's the stillness, and there is whatever is happening. The two dimensions. But the essence is that you are rooted in the stillness. And from there you perceive. We will also be addressing that from there you can also act. It's not just a passive state. We're approaching it, at right now we're approaching it in its passive aspect. But the state of stillness is both passive and active. It is both dynamic and at rest. Right now, let's just address the at rest aspect of that stillness. It is alert, it is still but alert. What I'm talking about is a reality in you now. You just have to sense it. And you cannot grasp it. It cannot be an object and saying, I have it now, I'm going to hang on to the stillness. It's always there. You don't need to create it. I need to become still. No, you're already still. You just need to realize that you're already still underneath the thinking. There's the continuous realm of stillness, of consciousness itself, out of which thinking comes. Thinking is consciousness that takes form, but the forms come and go. Underneath that is the timeless essence of who you are. And that's an actual realization. You don't have to, how can I still my mind? Is not the right approach, because that immediately becomes problematic. Now I have a problem to deal with. And perhaps in a few years' time I will be able to still my mind. Well, perhaps you will, but that means then in a few years' time you will suddenly realize that the stillness is already there, that you need time. So stillness is something to be discovered, that's already in you, not to be brought about. I'm sorry if I'm offending people who have been practicing meditation for many years, but if you need to meditate, it's a wonderful thing to meditate. But eventually you realize that the essence of meditation is to enter the timeless state of consciousness. And you can't enter the timeless state of consciousness through more future. So if you need to meditate, or if you're feeling like it's a wonderful thing to meditate. But it can also become a hindrance. The meditation then comes in between you and who you are in your essence. And you think, I need to do this meditation to get to who I am in my essence. But you already are who you are in your essence. And to get there, time doesn't really help you. Time is the one thing that stops you from realizing it. And time is fine on the practical external level of everyday existence. It works. But to awaken to who you are, it does not work. So we are discovering throughout this retreat, and then many of you have discovered it already, so it's just a question of deepening as you sit here, that dimension in you that we could call stillness. That we could also call being. The being that you are. I differentiate between being, which is the timeless and formless essence of who you are, and existence, which is the form. This body exists in time. Underneath that, beyond that, is the timeless essence of who you are, which does not exist, because exist means to stand out. Ex means out. It comes out of the primordial being, out of the unmanifested, timeless essence of all life, the source of all life that is always present in you, and then takes on form, existence, and forms come and go, come and go, come and go. Most people are lost in that realm of existence only. And then if you're lost, if that's all you know, then your life is frustrating and problematic. And ultimately, you're going to die and you have that feeling, there's something important that I missed, but I don't know what it is. And that is to find that, to discover it, that it is already here in you. That's the beauty of it. Stillness is already here. And then the mind will try to get all your attention back and manufacture more thoughts. If the pull is very strong, to get back into stillness, I always recommend feeling the aliveness in your inner energy field. It takes attention away from thinking. The inner body. Practice it here, not only as you sit here, when you talk to people in the restaurant, wherever you are, when other people are talking to you. Make this your practice here. I will remind you several times. Be still as you listen. Feel your body, or just be still and realize there's a space of stillness in which the words are being received. Rather than participating in this exchange in which there's only mind, one mind bouncing off another mind, like a ping pong. It's often the case when people have in conversation or discussions, you get completely drawn into a mind stream. And you're already, when somebody is talking to you, you're already preparing what you're going to say. Or you're already arguing against it. And so your practice here can be to be still as you listen, attentive, still. The same stillness that is listening to the rain, the same stillness, the same spacious stillness you listen to another human being. And then you bring a different energy, frequency to the interaction, to the relationship. And that's the beauty of it. You bring stillness into the interaction. It doesn't mean you're not going to talk. You may talk, but you will probably talk a little less than you would normally talk. And you will say something when there's something to say, something to contribute. And here again, the mind can come in and can make it problematic, and then you become self-conscious. I need to be still, or I need to show that I'm still. Does he notice that I'm still while I listen? I'm much stiller than he is. Why can't these people be still like myself? says, oh, she looks really spiritual, so still. Why can't I do that? And so on. The mind goes on and on. All these pointers that I already mentioned, whether you call it stillness, inner space, the now, the timeless dimension, all these pointers point to the same thing or no thing. And so you may notice, if you haven't noticed it already, I always talk about the same thing. And I only talk about one thing. It is not even a thing. And occasionally I may talk about things that tend to obscure that one thing. It's true. But in essence, it's still about the one thing. And so, if you feel an inner response as you listen to this speaker who only ever speaks about the same thing, if you feel an inner response and an increased sense of aliveness or peace, that means it's working for you. Not only that, it means the very same dimension of consciousness out of which the words come is now responding from within you. And that's what it's all about, not the words. It's about the arising of the awakened state, the one thing. And that's why we're here, not to accumulate more knowledge. If you wanted to accumulate more knowledge, you would be better off at a university. And you can listen to a professor on comparative religion. So it's not about knowledge, it's about realization. If it's boring for you to sit here, that simply means attention is still absorbed by thought activity. And of course this speaker does not give you much food for thought. And since the speaker doesn't give you much food for thought, the thinking mind becomes frustrated. And one aspect of that frustration is called boredom. Another aspect of that frustration could be irritation. Or twitching of legs. Notice if you are sitting or you're next to your neighbor sitting, and there's nothing personal in this, I'm just demonstrating, and there's a twitching of the leg, that means there's an irritation and a restlessness, so that person is still, there's mind, and is saying, what's going on here, this isn't enough. And this twitching is very normal for human beings, some do it all the time. If your dog did it, you would realize I need to take him to the vet. You would get very worried. But for humans it's normal. So if you're twitching, don't suppress it, Bring attention into the body. Take 1 or 2 deep breaths. Feel the air moving into the body. Feel the aliveness in the inner energy field. So some attention is moving away from mind activity. There is a restlessness arises there. There could also be a restlessness in the emotional field. We may be talking about that in more detail. Perhaps as you were traveling here, you underwent some stress. Most people find traveling stressful. Of course, there's nothing stressful about traveling as such. It's your reaction to the traveling that's stressful. The reaction is the stress. The traveling is not the stress. It can be heavy on the body. The body might feel tired, but the stress is something that arises through not being aligned with the present moment. The mental, emotional stress arises when you're not one with the present moment. At the driving to the airport, at the check-in counter, waiting for the plane, delays, being stuck on the runway, all kinds of not present and always wanting to be somewhere else. Feel stress. There's no stress otherwise. You can practice it on your way home. See if the same journey can be free of stress if you aligned with just the present moment. There's only ever just this moment to deal with, and that's what arises. So stress is not natural, it's unnatural. And so residual stress may be in you, might have arisen as you arrived here, something wasn't quite right. Okay. If it's still there in the emotional field, you can feel it. That's what is. Your attention is there. It doesn't have to rise into your mind and produce more stressful thought. It can happen if you're not present. The emotion is still there and then rises into your mind and you're thinking stressful thoughts. Without the thoughts, there's just the emotion left, the residue of the emotion. And I'm talking about relatively superficial things that happened recently. We'll address the pain body some other time. Not the first night. So the practice then is see if you can keep connected with the stillness as you go about doing things, listening to people, sitting here, contemplating nature. That really is the primordial practice. And the stillness is none other than the present moment, the essence of now. The power of now is the stillness. Stillness and present moment are inseparable. Present moment means now, not what happens in the now. Present moment is the space in which it happens. And that space is who you are. That space is formless and timeless consciousness itself. I'm telling you this because that's the foundation. You're ready to hear this. Often in past retreats, years ago, I would say this on the last day. I now tell you what the secret is. And here I'm telling you this on the first evening. And perhaps that's all you need to hear. Thank you. I don't need to be here anymore. Occasionally I hear this. I'm always happy to hear that. I don't need to be here anymore. Let's hope it's not an illusion. Whether or not it's an illusion, you'll find out when you start traveling home. And your first day at home, in your habitual surroundings, then you'll know whether it's an illusion or not. Or at the latest, your second or third day. But in some cases it's true. People truly realize, the realization is so deep that they go off and live the rest of their life in continuous surrender. Surrender to life, surrender to now, which is enormous power. That is the state of consciousness that is empowered, not weak. The ego will tell you it is when you surrender you become weak. The opposite is true, because the very power of life moves through you when you surrender to now. That's the only real spiritual practice. They're all trying to get there through this, that or the other. Surrender to now, aligned with now. Be the space for what arises. Don't look for yourself in what arises. And so even the 2,600 years ago, the same realization the Buddha had, just used slightly different words to express it. He said, everything is impermanent. This is one of the three characteristics of human existence. Everything is impermanent. Anicca is the Pali language, the word. Another characteristic is everything is unsatisfactory, unsatisfying. Sometimes translated as misery, sometimes translated as unhappiness, sometimes translated as unsatisfactoriness, dukkha. Everything is dukkha. What that means is the crack that we mentioned earlier, the crack in everything. No matter what situation you go into, you will find it doesn't last. Even if it's wonderfully satisfying, it won't last. Or usually you find cracks appear. If you're looking for fulfillment in situations, places, people, conditions, you're going to be frustrated, suffering. If you're looking for permanence in situations, places, people, conditions, it doesn't exist. Everything flows, everything comes and goes. So you have the two, you have suffering, the truth of dukkha, the truth of impermanence, anicca, and the third one is the truth of no self, anatta, which means if you look for yourself by identifying with this or that, possessions, places, people, relationships, attainments, recognition, in other words, any kind of thought structure. If you look for yourself in form, which is impermanent, any thought form, that's me, the story of me, trying to make the story into a perfect little story of me, it's not going to work, because there is no self in form. Who you are is formless. And if you don't realize that, you suffer. That's the truth of suffering, according to the Buddha. And it's so simple. If you're looking for yourself in form, achieving this, attaining that, identifying with any form, which ultimately is always thought form, you suffer. So life is suffering, as the Buddha is supposed to have said, is only true if you haven't awakened to who you are. Then life is no longer misery, because you have a place within that cannot be touched by the impermanent, fleeting nature of all forms. And that means your life has flowered, because we are here to realize that. Not just to escape from suffering, that's expressing it in negative terms. We are here to realize who we are beyond the form of the body, beyond our thought forms, beyond our emotional forms. We are here to realize that consciousness wants to realize itself through you. Consciousness wants to realize who it is, its essential nature. That's the awakening of consciousness in this manifested realm. And the essential delusion is to identify with thought forms. Because whatever you identify with and think you are, this or that story in your head, really it all consists of thought. Even if you identify with a car that you possess, a house that you possess, or your position in society, or people around your relationships, ultimately they all really arise inside you as thought forms. Anything out there has to become a mind form in you for you to notice it, to become aware of it. So everything is in you, the entire room is in you, arises in you. Whether there's any room here, you don't really know. You may be dreaming this room. It may be a collective dream. But the fact is, the dream is. Now, the dream could not be if there were not a consciousness in which the dream appears. So that is the one factor that cannot be doubted. And that's an incredible realization that the dream, if it is a dream, and normal existence has a dream-like quality because forms disappear continuously, appear and disappear. The very existence of yourself as a person could be a dream and is a kind of dream, short-lived dream. Look at all the people who were running around the big cities 50 years ago, which you see, sometimes you see old films, all engaged in very important business activities and all problematic life situations, running around the cities. See, look at old films. I love the street scenes in old films. And now where are they? Dissolved. And now they're replaced by others running around the city. So important. Everything matters absolutely, and they get stressed. Why? They don't know who they are. They are pursuing something that they need to catch. I need to arrive at some point, and finally, when I attain this and catch it, then I'll be okay. You never get there, of course. So this is very precious opportunity to realize what the very purpose of your life is. Deep down, not the outer purpose that varies from person to person, that's fine too, but a deeper purpose that applies to every human being. The purpose of the entire evolutionary process of the universe. You embody that, you are part of that. And that is the realization of that timeless dimension within. And then the art or the mastery of life is to live in this world without losing that deeper awareness. To deal with things, with people, with situations, without losing yourself in those things, without losing yourself in thoughts, without losing yourself in future, without losing yourself in all the things that the world says to you, tells you they matter, they are absolutely important. And this is how people live. The world devours their energy and their attention. One thing after another you need to deal with and think about, even in the middle of the night. Just running after, just trying to keep my life together. Like somebody juggling balls. Dreadful way to live, but normal. Everybody's lost in the world and lost in thought. That's the human condition. So there's an awakening happening that has come to a few individuals over the last few thousand years. A few individuals realized that deeper truth of who they are, and then they tried to teach others. Some became famous, some just had a few people around them and then nobody remembered them afterwards. And now there is a gradually a wider awakening happening. If that were not happening, it would be futile for us to sit here. I would be speaking to people who are totally identified with their mind, totally identified with form, totally identified with the dimension of time and past and future, and the words would be totally meaningless. In fact, nobody would have come here if they were not already beginning to awaken, already deeply in the awakening process. Don't ask your mind whether you're awakening or not. It doesn't know. I sometimes meet people who are very clearly awakening and they're asking me, when am I going to awaken? It's their mind saying something is going to happen to the mind. Has no idea what awakening is. The mind is afraid of awakening, and you can awaken it if the mind comes in and says, you awaken, you're fooling yourself. And you may even believe your mind. There are stories of people who awakened spiritually and they weren't quite sure whether that was really it. They felt very peaceful. And then they went to another master and said, am I really awake? And of course, whether a person is habitually in the state of surrender, the state of non-identification with thinking, the state of presence, the state of awareness, all the same thing. Whether a person is in that state, you cannot... I sometimes look at a human being and know at this moment they are definitely awake. Are they going to be awake tomorrow when they go back to their family? I don't know. At this moment they are awake and it's beautiful. So the awakening process has begun in them. I can see it. Whether or not they can live from that place, or whether it still becomes obscured the moment they go back into their habitual surroundings, I don't know until I go with them, unless I go with them and observe them, how they deal with people and situations as they arise, and then you know whether they go back into identification with thinking, old reactive patterns, pain body, identification with all that. And so you yourself, also you can use that as a criterion not what your mind is telling you, but see how is there change in your relationships with people? Is there change in how you respond to situations? As Ramdas said, if you think you're enlightened, go and visit your parents for 2 weeks or 1 week. That's all. Then you'll know where you're at, because it can be challenging for many people. Or have a coffee with your ex-wife or husband. But the fundamental question is this moment. That's all you can be responsible for at any given time. So the question is not, am I going to be able to sustain presence when I go back? You don't know. The only question is, am I present in this moment? That's enough. If you start thinking about whether you're going to be able to sustain this state of consciousness in normal existence, you're going to have a problem, because you start thinking, or probably won't be able to, but all you need is responsibility for this moment. This moment is all you need to be aligned with. And this moment takes the form of you sitting in this chair. In a few days, this moment may take the form of you trying to catch a plane or driving to the airport. And that's the moment, that's the form of the moment. Are you lost in the form of the moment, or are you dealing with the form of the moment but rooted in the now, the space of the moment? In which case you can be running towards the gate to catch your plane without any stress whatsoever. You enjoy every moment of it. And whether you catch the plane or not isn't really important, because you're rooted in a place of aliveness and stillness. If you don't catch the plane, then you sit there again for 2 or 3 hours. Does it really matter whether you sit on a plane next or whether you sit again in the lounge? You're going to be sitting somewhere. And does it really matter whether you arrive home 10 hours later or 10 hours sooner? Because at home too you're either sitting or lying or standing somewhere. It doesn't really matter where you are. It's only the mind is telling you shouldn't be here, you should be somewhere else. It's not true. You are here. And if you are here, you should be here. Life isn't insane. Life doesn't put you here if you shouldn't be here. It's just not possible. If you're here, then the totality of the universe has brought about the form of this moment, which is this body is now here. The entire universe, you can go back to the Big Bang when it all started. And the Big Bang had created more and more forms, differentiation, billions and billions of life forms, more and more differentiated. And finally, the universe appears temporarily as this body, sitting on this chair. So the entire universe has brought about the form of this moment, and the mind says, I shouldn't be here. Completely out of alignment. So the wonderful thing, it doesn't really matter where you are. Also, it doesn't matter what you do. It's the how. It's the state of consciousness, of connectedness with being. That's the question. Are you rooted in the essence of who you are? Are you rooted in the space of now? Or are you lost in the form of now? Rooted in the space of now. And it doesn't really matter anymore where you are, or in other words, you're fine with this moment as it is. And that is you become a completely different human being in that state of consciousness. You emanate a completely different energy. And people will come, and in the airport lounge somebody will sit next to you and say, "How can you look so happy? We just missed our plane." And don't expect, if you live in that state, that other people necessarily recognize it. They may not even recognize it. You can go back to visit your relatives and they don't see that there is a change in you. Why don't they see that there's a change in me? Well, they don't see it because they don't see you. They see their mental image of you, which has been stuck there for 30 years. So they have their image of who you are, and like most humans, they don't perceive what is, they perceive the screen of conceptualization. So they have their concepts of who you are, and when you come, they just revive their mental concepts. They hardly see you at all. That's quite normal. So don't expect necessarily people to recognize that there has been a change in you, and if they don't and they say the same old things, of course that's the present moment and it's fine. It's not that they should be different. It's again, the entire universe has brought this, that's the state of consciousness they manifest, and it's fine. So it's a beautiful realization that you're always where you are meant to be, obviously. And whatever happens to you is also meant to happen. Why? How can you say that? The entire universe has brought it about. Yes, you can now go into conceptualization and talk about dreadful things that have happened. Let's keep it just to you, because there's only ever one human being, really, that matters. And so there, you have to see in your own life, whatever happens, the entire universe has conspired to bring about the form of this moment. And the realization of that, with the realization of that, you go beyond the mere form of this moment, and a depth in you opens up. That is, we could also call that transcendence. You transcend all the limitations, seeming limitations of ordinary existence, which are the limitations of form. Of course, every form is limited. Every situation is some form of limitation also. Even if your life expands and you go into something incredible expansion, even there you will find certain limitations, new limitations. So transcendence of all that. It doesn't mean you run away from it. It's a totally different way of living. And it all comes down to just your relationship with the present moment. Friendly or hostile. It's just something little bit to check inside. How is my relationship friendly or hostile to what is? You can have a little piece of paper in your pocket or write it in your hand, so then you remember, or near your watch, and whenever you look at your watch, you read friendly or hostile. Because that's what life reflects back to you. We are going into that every day that we're here. All that remains for you is to go back into this beautiful nature. Then you will go back to your room or your tent. If you live in a tent, as some people are, I understand, you're even more in touch with the elements. Wonderful experience. Hopefully you're fairly dry. If you're not dry, then that's what is. It's not a problem. In your room, I also recommend you don't read any fiction or anything like that this weekend. No escape. Go into the body as you lie in bed or wherever you lie. Go into the body and feel the inner energy field of the body. And go into sleep from there. Not too much to think about. Listen also, you can listen to the sounds, the beautiful sounds of nature. And so you don't go with a burden of this heavy person. There's no need to think about your problems, because there's nothing you can do about them right now. In fact, they have no existence right now, unless you start thinking about them. What's the problem now? Can't find it. A moment of stillness. Then many of you will do tomorrow morning yoga and movement. This may be helpful also, so that presence is not just associated with sitting in a chair. Still. Natural meditation. Thank you. Just stay for a minute or so, and whenever you feel ready, then slowly you'll find yourself getting up.